right. So today we're going to talk about, it's basically, I've labeled it creating channels, communication channels, because the genesis of this presentation was, how do you create a podcast? How do you create a blog, a YouTube channel, write a book, stuff like that? It's basically all of these things are really, it's content creation, but it's also doing it for a specific channel, because although books are a little more one-time type things, when you look at things like podcasts and blogs and that, you're regularly feeding this channel with content. And so I wanted to try to cover all of these in a single session, even though we could easily do a whole series, where each, break out each one specifically and dig pretty deeply into them. And we have in the past, we've had points where we've talked a little more in depth about each of these from a technical point of view, I guess, more so than the business and the content side of point of view. So I'm still going to walk through this one, talking about some of the steps to get there, but it's a little more focused on the process than it is the technology. And so we're going to talk about, in this one, just sort of in general content creation. We're going to look at blogging, podcasts, books or audiobooks, YouTube or video platforms. And then also I broke them out because it's a little different, would be like your educational platforms, like a Udemy or something like that, where you're churning out content, but it's specific. It's like it's course or class content. So first, with content creation, why would we do this? Because it's work. It takes time. It takes effort. And it's usually not paid. It's usually stuff that we're at least starting off. Now, some people are professional podcasters, bloggers and such, and can make good money at it. But a lot of us, that's not it. And then when you start, you're not paid. This is stuff where you're investing in your future at best. Well, one of the reasons you want to do this is it is an excellent addition to your resume. Even if you never make a penny off of your content, this is something you can point to and say, hey, here's where I have produced content. Here's work that I've done. It's like an artist having a portfolio that you can look to say, oh, this person knows their stuff about these topics. So it is professional development valuable. It is a way to put something on a resume. And it's not just putting it on your resume. The fact that you do that, there are certain skills, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. There's going to be some skills you're going to learn as part of that. There are things that you get out of creating content and presenting it and creating that platform and supporting that platform that you're not going to have doing other stuff. Like if you are a coder, you can write code all day and be very good at it, and never have the skills that you would develop if you were now going to be like these coders that record themselves and then build a community and all that kind of stuff. So there's a good set of skills that you're going to learn from this. It's also an opportunity to either build or contribute to a community. And especially these days where people remote all the time and things like that, I think we maybe we've lost that a little bit, but there are definitely, as developers, I think we sometimes underestimate the value of the communities that already exist that we probably lean on daily, particularly where most of us now will, if we want to learn something, we'll go Google search, we'll find somebody else has somewhat done it, and we can either build on what they've done, or sometimes almost directly just take what they've done, make a few modifications, and boom, we're off and running. Something that I don't think people realize enough that are particularly content creators, the exception being probably the master of that would be like a Tim Ferriss, is that you can test theories and research ideas as part of your content creation. You can go out there as a developer, and something I've done is say, you know what, I want to learn this new language, or I want to play around in this new environment, and go do it. Yeah, you can. The content creation part sort of drives you to create an outline and have a goal, and not just play around in it, but actually use it. And so doing content creation as part of either testing out a theory or learning new ideas or doing research is actually very useful, particularly in the whole accountability side of it. Because now you're not just doing it for fun, you're doing it as part of this sort of this promise that you've made of, I'm going to do this class, I'm going to do this course, I'm going to have this season or this series that I'm going to go through. And part of it too is content creation is a good excuse to do more of what you enjoy. Do what you love. If you like learning new programming languages, then that could be your shtick, is that you are constantly showing you're going through and doing the languages, or writing tests for systems, or writing applications of their own, or getting out of the technology side from content. Is it could be you doing movie reviews for the movies that you've watched in the last week, or TV shows that you love, or books that series that you like to read, or anything like that. Content creation, we often in developreneur world talk about technology stuff and technical things. However, content creation can be anything. It could be whatever your hobby is. And if your hobby, you could be a high-end C coder, let's say C# coder, and your hobby happens to be, I don't know, vegetable gardens. And you could do, say, a podcast or video series on your vegetable garden and doing all that kind of stuff. And you'd be amazed at how much the fact that you did that you put that effort in, that you do those production values, that you learn all those things about a gardening podcast, it does benefit you professionally. It is a professional development tool. So let's talk about the channels that are out there a little bit. And these are the ones we're going to go through anyways. Blogs, so daily, weekly, regular writing. You got your podcast, which I'm always going to assume these days it's an audio podcast, although there are video podcasts and have been from the start. There was also video blogs, basically, that were effectively that. But most of that video related stuff now is really more moved over to be like, it becomes like a YouTube channel or something along those lines. And then there's books or audiobooks, which are going to be more, to me, the difference between a blog and a book or an audiobook is that instead of that regular release cadence that you have for a blog, or at least that you should, we'll talk about that, you've sort of bundled it all up and then have one big release. In the podcasting world, Hardcore History is actually an interesting example of doing that in an audio sense, where he probably could do a blog or a podcast where he does, I don't know, 15, 20-minute episode once a week or something like that, depending on research and all that. Instead, he does these, monumental 3, 4, 5 hour, they're basically audiobooks that he's cranking out, even though it's, technically a podcast. And then there's the education platforms, which are out there. Like I've mentioned Udemy, and there's many others, and you can even create your own, where you are putting some, basically think of like a traditional class or course on whatever your topic happens to be. And then, like say it's learning a foreign language, then you have, all of these sessions of, hey, we're going to learn these words and we're going to learn those words and we're going to learn how to put these together. And we're going to learn sentences and grammar, blah, 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 whatever it takes to get a student from whatever the starting point is to the end point for that class. So we have a lot out there. And let's start with blogs, because those are sort of the oldest version of these. So when you're going to launch a blog, first thing is, I guess isn't necessarily all in order, but one of the things you really need is what is your theme or vision or mission statement? Why are you doing this blog? And it could be just a personal blog. It's like, hey, I just want to weekly write about what's going on in my life. That's fine. That is suitable as a vision, or the vision or the mission statement or your theme. It could be something like, I'm gonna do sort of like I've suggested this. I'm going to sort of do a work status of like, here's a couple of things I learned, this week at work. It could be, again, it could be like a sports related. Hey, here's the latest, my favorite teams that I follow and news related to them. It could be political. Here's the political stuff that I'm following. If you look at popular podcasts in particular, there is a theme or some sort of like vision statement, mission statement, or something like that maybe they haven't specified that, but you can extract that by looking at the title, the topics, sort of the direction they go, so that on a given episode, usually, if you just randomly pick an episode, you're going to know that roughly these are the things they're going to talk about. This is roughly the expectations I have for this blog. And in this case, and it's something where there's a production value. Blogs are a little different from some of the others, but even with the blog, there is the language that you use as far as, is it aimed at first graders, sixth graders, PhDs in grammar, the grammatical stuff you use, the colloquialisms, the like the references and bibliographies and things like that you may include, whether it's all text or whether you're going to include diagrams and stuff like that, whether it's more opinion versus something that's heavily researched where you've got a lot of data points. All of these things factor into your approach or your tone for your blog. Is it lighthearted? Is it more professorial, academic? Is it very business-like? Is it humorous? Is it serious? Is it dramatic? Is it just you, or does it involve other people, either interviews or research, or reading that you've done from other blogs? All of that is stuff that you want to sort of have as your starting point. If you think about it to me, the easiest way to think about it is acting. When an actor steps into a role, there is everything they do impacts how you view that person that they're acting as. And that's, it comes to the whole idea of you can do stuff that's in character or out of character. And if it's out of character, it can be very jarring or even ruin the whole story, or whatever you're trying to communicate. Blog is the same way. It helps to have a character that you are, that character that you step into that as part of doing the blog. And it may just be who you are normally. That may work fine, because you should find it easy to be yourself. But there may be other things that you want to do where it's, like I said, it may be more serious. It may be more professional. And think about it. Are who's your target audience? Are you talking to your boss? Are you talking to your parents and your family? Are you talking to your buddies? Whatever it is. All of that factors into this approach or tone that you want to set up. Scheduling or a calendar is critical and we're going to see this throughout this presentation. Figure out what are you comfortable doing? Are you going to write a blog once a day, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, once a year? Figure it out, and then set your mind to the point that you're going to get that done. Now, once a year, it's probably not going to be frequent enough. It's one of those. I mean, I guess you could do like a January 1st every year, December 31st every year, July 4th, or pick a date that's like in itself is very memorable or tied to a holiday or something like that. But if you're doing a blog that only shows up once a year, really, even if you're doing a blog that's once a quarter, you're probably going to have a hard time getting, some momentum and getting a following for that, assuming that that's one of the things you want to do. It's not always needed. And sometimes, like if you're really more trying to do more, it's almost more like a newsletter approach. Maybe you do a quarterly, here's how things are going. Here's what's, planned for the quarter ahead. And you could do that professionally. You could do that at, maybe it's a family thing. You send out something that's really meant for personal friends and family. Hey, here's what's going on. Here's the big things that are coming up in my life. When you're going to launch, before you launch, have a list, at least, I would say at least 3 or 4, preferably like a half dozen to a dozen topics that you want to cover. And this, again, if you're cranking this out once a year, you really don't have to worry about it. But even if you're doing it monthly, I would want to make sure I've got at least 4 or 5 months worth of topics already lined up before I even dive into it. It's like, okay, I've set up my vision, my mission, so I've got my theme. I know what my target audience is. I know the approach, the tone I'm going to take. All right, what am I going to write about? And then when you're going to get into the launching is, how am I going to let people know that this exists? I mean, you could just write it and say, I don't care if anybody ever reads it. I'm just doing this to write it. But typically you're going to want to get, put this out in front of people, even if it's just friends and family. So think through, what is that going to look like? How are you going to announce it? Are you going to send emails? Are you going to try to create a mailing list? Are you going to call a bunch of people? Because when you do the launch, I guess in all caps, like the big launch day or whatever, is it going to be who cares? Or is it going to be, okay, I've sent it out to these people, so now hopefully, they'll at least check out my site. So that's a blog.